All right, so five, four, three, two, one. All right, well, I'm here with Neil, who is an author, and he has quite the story to share with us today that I think we're all going
because I certainly have had a lot of those to overcome over my lifetime. So I'm always encouraged to talk about how I did that and give people hope and encouragement from where they're at. So, um, my name's Neil Getzlow. I live in Kansas City and married to my wife Amy for 9 years. We've got between us five boys. I have two sons of my own and three stepsons. Yeah, quite a handful. And but they're all 18 and over, so a little, different challenges these days. And I think heck, if we can even get into that topic of mental health and Generation Z and what they're going through, because it is quite interesting. Um, for me, my story is rooted in addiction that maybe you're probably not familiar with, or maybe never considered it an addiction. But I, for most of my life, most of what I can remember, I had an addiction to pornography and addiction, which led to an addiction to sex. And that started way back when I was 9 years old. There was a forest behind my elementary school, and it was nicknamed the Playboy Forest. And so after school, we'd go and ride our bikes. So we were pretty close. We'd ride our bikes to this forest, and there's like a little opening inside of it, and it was kind of around this campfire area. There was just a bunch of torn up bits of Playboy magazines all around. And so the older kids would go there first, and then the younger guys would follow in there later, and that's what we did. And I mean, really, that sort of sucked me in at the age of 9. And I was doing research for my book, and when I saw the average age of that people are first exposed to porn is at the age of 11 now. So, which was kind of surprising. And I mean, even though I knew it was, for me, it was young, I thought maybe I was an exception to the rule. But in today's world, it's so easy to just tap on your phone and you can find it within 30 seconds if you wanted to. So that I grew up in the 80s, and so as I graduated from Playboy magazines, then my parents got divorced when I was 11 or 10 years old. I moved into an apartment with my mom. On either side of her bed, she had these two nightstands with stacks of Playboy and Penthouse magazines on. So of course, though I became a latchkey kid, typical latchkey kid of the 80s, home alone most of the time, and that's how I filled up my time. And that addiction to porn sort of overtook I sort of grew up with that. And then as I became an adult, it would sort of ebb and flow over the course of the years, but ultimately it became sort of a gateway drug for me, and that led me to taking more risks and trying to. Soon porn wasn't enough, right? I needed to get the real thing, and so then my addiction led to me beginning to meet with prostitutes for probably the last 6-7 years. And that addiction led me to a hotel room in Chicago in February of 2020, and I set up an appointment to meet a prostitute. I was on a business trip and went to go have the appointment. As I was getting ready to leave, this woman's partner came out of the other bedroom. He looked like a 6'5", 300-pound offensive lineman from the Chicago Bears, dressed in drag, of course. and comes out holding his cell phone in his hand. He shows it to me, and it's got my wife, Amy. It's got her social media picture on there, and it's got her contact information. And he's like, "You're going to have to pay us more money, or we're going to call your wife." Well, that's an interesting position to find yourself in.
Absolutely.
And and my first thought was just getting out of the. I just wanted to get out alive. I couldn't. I couldn't even imagine yet my wife getting a phone call that I was dead in a hotel room in downtown Chicago. After being killed by a prostitute and her friend. So about $900 later, I did get out of that room. But as I'm walking out of the room, and going to the elevator, I could hear the door open up behind me, and they're like, "Hey, hey, you're going to have to pay us more money, or we're going to call your wife." Well, at that point, the elevator opened. I jumped in, got out of the hotel, and went on with my day. And that's why I called my book Unmasked, because I was I was wearing a mask most of my life behind all these addictions and all these lies I was keeping. So I went on to have my meetings. Nobody knew. Anyone I came across from work had no idea that I had just been blackmailed by a prostitute. I just had it stuffed inside and just carried on. Made it home to Kansas City that night, and they did not call again. So I'm kind of thinking, all right, I dodged a bullet. I avoided it. Hey, I'll just forget it. And I did. Like I could compartmentalize this stuff so well that I just put it out of my mind and thinking, boy, I'm good. I'm good. I can get away with this, right? And but then God had other plans for me. So 3 days later, and this is March 1st, 2020. It's 9:30 at night, Sunday night, and I'm doing some work in my office, and my phone starts blowing up with text messages, and it's from this couple in Chicago, and they are texting me saying, "You've got 15 minutes to pay us more money, or we're going to call your wife." And and of course, I'm kind of thinking, well, there's like, why would they call Amy? Like, if they called Amy, then I'm not going to give them any more money, so they'd be out of luck. But of course, that was obviously extremely naive, because I'm assuming they probably have multiple victims they're stringing along and getting money wherever they can. So once they realized I wasn't paying, they pulled the plug on me. But instead of just walking away, 15 minutes later, they called Amy, and I could hear her phone go off upstairs, and I could hear that she was talking to someone, and then the footsteps coming down the stairs and getting louder and louder as they're heading to my office, and the door flies open, and she's like, "Are you cheating on me?" And proceeded to tell me that she just got a call from this prostitute, and who sort of spilled the beans on everything that I was doing when I was out of town. So that was what I like to consider the first time that God smacked me in the head with a 2x4. And you would think, when you got hit pretty hard like that, you'd think that would wake you up, but it did not wake me up. In fact, when Amy asked me what I was doing, I did what any good addict would do. I lied and told her this was the first time anything like this ever happened. I've never done this before. It's not going to happen again. It was all a lie. Anything I could say just to get out of the situation. And again, for me, it wasn't about. It wasn't. I was more upset that I got caught than I was upset at myself for this pain that I was causing in my life and in my marriage. So. So about, obviously then about 2 weeks later, we go on lockdown because of COVID. So my wife and I are now suddenly, both of us are, she's unable to work for 2 months, and my business sort of kind of tailed off. I lost some clients because of the pandemic. So we're basically locked down together for 2 months, trying to sort through this. Made a very awkward time, of course. And, but about 6 weeks after that encounter in Chicago, my addictions flared up again. And I set out to make an appointment with someone in Kansas City who I had previously seen. set it all up on text message, but my text messages are synced up to my laptop, so they were all on my laptop. Now, this is what I like to say. The second time God hit me in the head with a 2x4. Normally, when I leave the house, like I make sure like my laptop is locked, like all my secrets are on there. So obviously, I can't take the chance that Amy's going to find it. So I lock it. There's no way she can get in. She doesn't have my passwords at this time to be able to unlock the computer. So I very confidently leave the house. But I'd say maybe 10 minutes later, my phone starts getting text messages. This time it's from Amy. And lo and behold, somehow my computer was unlocked. And as soon as I had left the house, she got on there because she knew her gut was telling her something was up. She got on the computer and saw all these messages that I was trying to set up an appointment. And so she texted me screenshots of them, and she's like, what's going on? Well, I was headed to dinner at the time with my youngest son, and managed to somehow make it through dinner. He would later tell me that I was the most distant he's ever seen me. I was like, yeah, there was a reason why, because I was inside. I was having an internal freak out moment there, trying to think about how I was going to protect my story. So longest drive home back to Amy after dinner, and I come inside, and I don't, honestly, I don't even remember what kind of story I told her. It was whatever it was junk. She clearly didn't believe me, rightfully so, and she was just having none of it. So before we went to bed that night, and Amy, I would say Amy was a believer of Jesus and born again Christian, and so she says, before I go to bed that night, if you have any hope of saving this marriage, you need to pray to God and ask for some help for yourself. I was like, okay, well, and I will point out that I have been an atheist my entire life. In fact, I grew up in a Jewish household in St. Louis. All my friends were Jewish. I like to say, really, I was in it for the jokes and the food and the culture, because that's really what it was, being Jewish in St. Louis. At least for me, it wasn't about God or anything like that. It was just about the traditions and the customs. So I had never prayed before. So the next morning, I wake up and Amy's already gone. She had left the house, didn't tell me. So I'm laying there in bed by myself, and I just thought to myself, well, this is probably the best time ever to start praying. And that's what I did. I asked God. I said, look, I don't know what to do. I'm stuck in these addictions. I don't know how to get out of them. I need some help. I don't have anywhere to go. If you're real, if you're out there, if there's help out there, give me a sign. Let me know something. And sure enough, right after I finished that prayer, the garage door pops up, and it is Amy. And that's significant because what I'm about to find out over the course of the next few hours is Amy's the key to my whole story, and really a big reason why I was able to overcome my addictions pretty rapidly. So she gets inside. I tell her, hey, I prayed. I want to work on our marriage. Can we work on it? And she's agrees very reluctantly, because she's still just is unsure how much of the truth I'm telling her. And at this point, I'm not telling her much, other than I just want to work on our marriage. So a few hours later, in the evening, we're on the couch, and here's what I will say is the final smack in the head from God, and because he's like, I'm going to get your attention one way or the other. Amy gets a random Facebook message from some guy we don't know, and all it says is, do you know a Neil Getzlow? Well, I don't know why or how this or what triggered inside me, but as soon as she read that message, I just knew, like, that's it. I feel an overwhelming sense to confess everything to her and let her know what I've been doing over the course of our marriage. It turns out that guy who messaged her was the ex-boyfriend of another woman I had an arrangement with in Kansas City. and he had all the receipts from her phone and her iPad that he was texting Amy. So like this was it. Like there was nowhere else for me to go. Right. This is it. I'm at the edge of the cliff. And so I'm like, all right, this is it, Amy. Sit down. And I proceeded to do what I say in the book is basically threw up all over the floor of our marriage. Like, and I know if you feel like anytime you get sick, you can feel it in the pit of your stomach, and it just starts slowly moving up your chest, and finally it's this, you can't help it, it comes out. And that's what happened to me. Everything came out. And but what happened next definitely was the moment that my life changed and transformed. She looked up at me after I told her all this, and again, I felt better, right? Like you do after you throw up. I felt instantly better, but not sure what Amy's reaction was going to be. But she looks up at me and she's like, Neil, Jesus forgave me for my sins. How can I not forgive you for yours? I forgive you. And that was the moment that my heart changed. Like and I know it sounds crazy. And again, coming from someone who was a complete and total atheist for 50 years, but that was the moment that I believed in God and came to Jesus, and have not looked at porn since that day. I have not been tempted to stray out of my marriage since that day. In fact, my life is a complete 180 from where it was back in that day in April of 2020. And yeah, it's just it's unbelievable. It's still unbelievable at times that of what happened. And I'll say too, like because I know people always, Amy's friends or are always wondering, how can you stay with him through all this? And like Amy's forgiveness was huge for us, because it immediately cut out the bitterness, any bitterness that would have festered there. But what the forgiveness didn't do was didn't take away the responsibility I had to clean myself up. It didn't take away the accountability that I needed to have to be a better man, to stay away from this stuff, to get rid of my addiction. And it created a lot of pain. It doesn't take away any of the pain. The forgiveness just allowed us gave us a place to heal and to come and then start to rebuild our marriage. And that's what we did. And we've been spent the past 18 months rebuilding the marriage with God at the center of it. And it's been great.
Absolutely.
That was a long journey.
That right there was the longest intro I've had from anybody. So congratulations.
Sorry, man.
You're good. You just set the stage for you just got on a roll and set the stage for everything. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That is a very that's a compelling story. I want to kind of backtrack though and kind of unpack a lot of that.
Please.
Because
there is a lot of layers. So let's drill down.
I know the one word that you used toward the beginning that really hit me was the word distant. Because
what word? I'm sorry.
Distant.
Oh yeah.
Because I know personally I go through a lot of disconnect, and everything is kind of like one of the easiest things to fall back on for me and myself. And I've had my battles and shared things that I've been addicted to and whatnot. Made my mistakes, and I'm kind of wondering, has that always been kind of a theme for you? Is like, things get kind of overwhelming? Is it automatically it triggers that like disconnect? And
yeah,
it's just something that's real simple that almost like you drift into like that lizard brain and you just kind of like, man, forget the world, and you're just right on.
I mean, I turn into a zombie, and I will, I'll just fill in some of the blanks here. Like I suffered from depression and anxiety most of my life, even though I never wanted to admit it and just deal with it myself. But how I dealt with it was through these addictions, through pornography. And then the older I got, Um, I wasn't much of a drinker in my 20s and 30s, but by the time I'm in my 40s, I'm out. Whenever the anxiety hits, I'm out drinking or smoking dope, um, leaving Amy home alone. I'm just going out partying with my friends. I mean, I was, just looking for an escape. It didn't matter what it was. It could have been porn. It could
Right.
have been sex with somebody else. It could have been going to the sporting event without Amy, going to the bars without Amy, whatever it was, right? Like I always just wanted an escape. And I looked for any opportunity I could to get away from the realities that were pounding on the door that I just couldn't, I didn't know how to solve at the time.
Absolutely. I can relate to that. So like with
Yeah,
the depression, let's start there. Is it
sure.
is it something that you kind of just it's always been there? Was there like a defining point that triggered it and then it kind of stuck with you?
Uh, so
I
I
mean,
will
I know
say that,
like
yeah,
I know everybody has their ebbs and flows with it. I experienced that by
yeah,
myself. But for me it's kind of like a genetic thing because it's a feeling that's always been there even like in my youngest memories. Is there was a hard time connecting and finding joy and happiness within moments and experiences. There's always that underlining theme of kind of, I guess the easiest way to describe the depression is like a doom and a gloom, kind of like it doesn't matter. This I can't connect to this.
yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, if I look back on my childhood, like I probably would say that, I was, even though I didn't know it at the time, probably was depressed and not very happy as a kid growing up. So I'll say this. Um, I fully credit God and fully credit Jesus for breaking me out of these addictions. Um, that was the place that I needed to start. But there's one also very important part of my recovery, which was I went and talked to a therapist, and Amy and I went to talk to someone together, a counselor, to help us fight through this. And he was critical to helping us, give us some strategies for how to deal with this. And it's like I'll never forget the first time I talked to him. His very first question was, "What's the first thing you remember you had to learn how to do as a little kid?" It's like, wow, that's a really interesting question. And I thought about it for a minute, and I was like, well, I had to learn how to be alone. And it's like the light bulb just went off, like, holy, like, it's just like, wow, like it just unlocked all of these feelings and emotions. Because like I said, my parents got divorced when I was 10. This apartment complex we moved to, there were no other kids there. So I was going to school we moved schools. So I lost all my friends from elementary school. My siblings were all older, so they were already actually out of the house by the time we moved into this apartment. And then my mom had to start working again. I had to learn how to be alone. And there was this hole in my heart that's where I learned how to fill up on the pornography. And then again, like I said, that time it's the 80s, so cable TV is just invented. So now I'm sort of filling myself up on MTV. Now MTV is probably pretty tame back in the 80s, as maybe it's compared to today, but that culture of sex and sexuality was really starting to ramp up about that time with the advent of cable TV and HBO and Skinamax, right? All those great shows from the 80s. So that's what I filled my time up. But what my therapist also helped me understand was it fed a shame cycle in my life. And that cycle would always go, I'm alone because nobody loves me. I need to fill up my heart with something. So I'm going to look at this pornography that's around me. I feel good looking at the pornography, but when I'm done, I have this overwhelming sense of guilt and shame. This is why I'm alone. This is why nobody loves me. And then the cycle would repeat. And that cycle just repeats over and over and over again. It did for 40 years of my life. I'd get into that cycle. There'd be things that would trigger it, and I would just, and then that would set me off on, one of these escapes, whether it was seeing somebody or whether it was going to the bars, that cycle would just be nonstop.
Right.
And just, yeah.
Yeah, and whether it ends up being pornography and acting out in a sexual manner, or it's acting
Yeah.
out with drugs and even self-harm, or eventually even the suicide attempts. It
Yeah.
all boils down to that feeling that, hey, I've got this gut feeling that I'm alone, I'm depressed, nobody loves me, nobody wants to be around me, and it's really hard to sit those feelings, and you find that escape. And when you get that escape, it triggers that reward mechanism in the brain, and that just automatically becomes your simple go-to mechanism. And it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter. It doesn't really make a difference what ends up coming in and out or anything. It's always the one consistent thing, because it's something that's within your control.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And um, yeah, it's amazing just how it manifests itself over and over again. And when I look back now, in a way, I feel like I was mentally abusing Amy over all these years of our marriage, because of the way I treated her, the way I handled life. It was not intentional, but it was mental abuse. I left her alone all the time to go out and do these activities, and it's painful to think about. It's some of the hard stuff to think about, is how my actions have impacted her. And it's I always think about these times when I went out to go meet these other women, and it would always feel the same way. Like, you'd have this big rush of finding, going online for the hunt and trying to find someone, and then setting up the appointment, and then going to have the appointment, and it's all this big rush. But I swear, I'd leave this person's hotel room or apartment or whatever, before I even got back to my car, that tidal wave of guilt and shame would hit me, and I'd be like, what did I just do? Like, why am I doing this? I don't want to do this. It brings me a moment of what I like to believe is joy, but it really isn't. And it's crazy, because when I drive all the way home, and the whole time I'm thinking, I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to do this again. And then 2 weeks later, I'm back in the situation doing it again. And it's just, it was I'm just grateful that I was able to break free from the cycle, and do it in a way that very quickly break away from it. I know that I'm lucky, because I know a lot of people struggle with addictions, that they relapse, and they can't seem to break free. So I know it's hard. But there is hope out. There is hope. And,
Right.
and for me, again, I'm gonna give credit to God for my story. I just don't think I can't imagine I'd be standing here talking about this if it wasn't for what He did in my life, and led me to writing this book to talk about
Yeah.
my story and what I've done to overcome over the past couple of years. But it's also getting professional counseling, talking to people, and I also say too, if you want to get yourself healthy physically, you stop eating junk food, right? You don't go to fast food restaurants, you stop eating potato chips, whatever, stop eating sweets, and then you go work out and all that stuff. But we never talk about, at least I never did, and I'm sure with men it's harder to talk about, how do you get your mind in shape? What do you do for that? And for me, and this is, this is just for me. Like I was filling up my mind and my time with what I now say is the junk food of the mental world. I was binging Netflix. I was binging sports. I was binging TV shows on cable TV. Like I was just sucked in by the culture and filling up my mind with all this junk. And it was keeping me focused on the wrong things. And I tell you, I've spent I've spent the better part of this past couple of years trying to cancel my culture. I know it sounds kind of crazy because people don't want to be canceled, but I canceled my own culture before culture canceled me. Like I canceled Netflix. We got rid of cable TV. Really stopped watching sports to the extent that I did before. Still enjoy it every once in a while, but it is not something that I'm spending countless hours on. And I replaced it with, God. I replaced it with reading the Bible. I replaced it with, watching probably more appropriate television shows for me, right? This is just how I was needed to recalibrate my mind. But what it does is that you fill yourself up with all this other stuff, what I consider the good stuff. You don't have time for any of that other junk. And it just slowly finally just goes away, and I don't even think about it anymore.
Right.
So that's
that's
how I've been able to handle.
Yeah, that's an important thing. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head there with how we all spend so much time literally filling our minds with junk. That garbage. I mean, I had one of those awakening moments when I was living in my truck and between my truck and a old deer blind. I didn't have the access to the TV. And that was probably about a 6 to 8 month process where I just didn't have it. And once I got back on my feet, I never found myself jumping back into it. During that process, I learned to start reading more, listening to, things that are going to benefit me and,
Yeah.
help me grow. And that's become my pattern now. It's like now
Yep.
I turn on the TV now and I can't even really connect with any of this. It's so weird to think,
Yes.
2 years ago, man, this is what I turned on for noise. Now what is that thing?
You're right. It is so amazing because I feel the same exact way. Because it's been about 2 years for me, and it just like I can't. And I used to love TV. I used to love watching every trashy show that was out there. And but now I watch it now, and it's like I can't believe like how much time I gave
Right.
all this stuff. And there's just yeah. So
It's crazy
yeah,
once you travel down a different path, how even to look, back down the path or back down the old road you're on, how how you can't connect to it, how you build
no, and
those new patterns.
yeah, and I'd say like I would, if the Neil from 2019 sat down with the Neil from 2021, he'd look at me, shake his head, and be like, "You are crazy. Like, who are you? I don't
Right.
recognize you. I don't know who you are." And that's, again, and from my perspective, that's what I mentioned earlier. Like for me, like I truly believe God gave me a new heart and new desires and new things that I needed to focus on. Like it's funny, like so all this happened for me during COVID, and I swear, like it's and I know COVID is tough for a lot of people, and it made people's depression and anxiety so much worse. And everybody probably has someone that they've lost over the course of the pandemic. But I would say for Amy and I, it was a blessing because God basically looked at me and said, "I'm going to take away everything that you love. You're not going to be able to go out with your friends to party. You're not going to be able to watch sports on TV because obviously sports went away for several months." Like he's like, "I'm taking away everything that you used to love. Now you got to focus on yourself. How are you going to reset your life?" And I looked at it as really was just a very once in a lifetime opportunity to reset.
It
And
really
that's what I did.
was. And
Yeah.
I love hearing stories about how people have taken that time, that downtime during COVID, and instead of just letting it be, literally dead time where we're just there, they turn it into that alive time and figure out how to benefit and improve themselves. Because you had an opportunity where you were forced to look at the way you were doing things, and for a lot of us, it made us realize that we were doing a lot of things that either we didn't need to be doing, or they weren't healthy for us, or really they were just destroying our quality of life that we should have. And to rework that into a more manageable system, and a system that's really benefiting not only ourselves but the people that are around us. That's the good part that came out of the whole COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like to think that I was kind of red pilled myself a little bit and just kind of had my eyes open to what culture was trying to tell you. And I think one of the other big things that I did was pretty much get rid of social media for about 6 months or so. Like I deleted my Twitter account, was rarely on Facebook. I've slowly brought Facebook back a little bit, only out of necessity. At this point, I still think it's all pretty much cesspool, but I got to tolerate it to some extent. But you just like I unplugged that, and that made a huge difference too. Just not that it's just so not the real world. What you see online is just not the real world, and what people
No, and
just you're seeing. Yeah,
I'm going to venture to
go ahead.
say that was probably a common theme as far as a trigger for you during those
Yeah,
processes, because it,
yeah,
it gave you something to compare yourself against that you didn't have, and probably made you feel a little inadequate, and therefore you were
yeah,
diving into those other things just to find a false sense of justification.
yeah. I mean, my identity was rooted in all that. So the kind of job I had, the friends I had, who they were, the amount of alcohol I could consume, the size of my house, what kind of car I drove, all of that. I can, if my sporting team was doing well, that was part of my identity that I celebrated. Like that was my identity, and it, it wasn't until I finally realized that doesn't matter. Like my identity now for me, again, my identity is rooted in being a child of God. That's what I celebrate now, and that's what grounds me. But whatever situation you're in, these things that we worship now, money and careers and all that. Again, for me, over this past couple of years, just opened my eyes to it's just those things just aren't important. I mean, they're just not.
Yeah, I mean, to me, a lot of this kind of ties together on the fact that
Yeah,
it took that stumble in order to realize, hey, you're living
yeah,
the wrong values. You're
yes,
holding the wrong things on a pedestal, because it was about having the job, putting all the effort in there, bringing home the paycheck in order to fuel all this other stuff that really it's insignificant because it can disappear or be taken away from you. There's no permanence in that, and that impermanence is what you're chasing. And then when everything ended up, in the situation that, in the space and the reality you're in now, you've you've seen that. You've seen that, hey, this is not where I should be at. I should be here focusing on values to me that truly fulfill my way of life and my thinking and who I am. I need to be
yeah,
defined by those aspects.
yeah, and it. God, I just had a thought that it just totally popped out of my head. So
Such as
sorry
like
about this.
Oh, you're good. I'll just
Oh,
continue on like I know what I'm
yeah,
talking
keep
about.
going. Yeah, keep going.
Such as like value virtues even, which are higher than that than a value. Or virtues such as, your family means something to you.
Yeah,
And you live every day now to um build that around you as opposed to I'm going to work, putting all my effort in there. When by the time I'm making home, I'm spent, I'm triggered. I need to just disconnect essentially. And
yeah,
by doing that, you're fulfilling yourself and you don't have that, you don't have to walk away with that. Man, what did I just do? That was a waste of my time. It was good for 2 seconds. You now have something firm directly in your eyesight.
yeah. And such an important point for me because you know, it, you're talking about it. I'm probably, hopefully, I'm not making it seem like it's just been a walk in the park because it's not easy. And even today, like, so I would say that I think for large majority of the time, my depression and anxiety are probably non-existent. But but there are days where that becomes an issue. Um, but it's how you handle it now, and how I've learned how to handle it that's made the difference. And I'm not going back to the old crutches. Because I have a job that is all encompassing from 8 to 5, and like you said, I'm worn out when I log off for the day, and I want to disconnect, but um, I I guess I disconnect in different ways now. Like I disconnect from work and shut that off, and you're not getting any more of my time after 5 o'clock. That's for sure. And again, for me, now how I recharge myself and sort of try to put that anxiety behind me again, I am turning to the Bible. That's where I get my source of strength and energy from. And it's also about this new relationship that I have with my wife, which I want to talk about here because I've got the marriage now that I've always wanted to have, and I never was, never I never had that before. But now we have this great relationship. We spent all this time learning how to talk, learning how to communicate, getting to know each other again, and it's been awesome. And so in the past, where if I wanted to disconnect, I didn't want to be around her. I wanted to go out and be alone or be with my friends and do dangerous activities. Now I want to be around her all the time. And it's that's my way of handling handling things now is praying and being with my wife and being with our kids, and and trying to trust that there's a plan, and you just have to go with it.
Well, first of all, we got to stop here and I'm going to tell you congratulations on all of that. That is a
Thank you.
wonderful thing.
It
And then
is. Yeah.
secondly, I'm going to take your choice of words in there and spin them in a way that'll probably make you laugh because
Okay.
what you were doing at a point was, you were chasing those dangerous moments, and now your dangerous moments you're chasing are probably cooking your eggs the wrong way in the morning for your wife.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
But you know
Yeah,
what?
for
Those are
sure.
those are a lot better and more meaningful dangers to be chasing.
Man, I tell you what, you just triggered some thought in my mind. My wife and I, a few weeks ago, went to Colorado for the weekend, just north of Fort Collins. We stayed in an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere, and it was, and there was nobody around. It was the most quiet I have ever heard the world in my life, and it was awesome. Like I could hear the birds flapping their wings as they're flying overhead because there's no traffic, there's no highway ambient sound. It was amazing. All that white noise when you shut it off, it's just like, but that's just one of my favorite moments. And it's not like we did anything magical or anything. We were just hanging out in this house, being together, and just not being, not connected to the world, and just enjoying what we've got. And those, those are the moments that I cherish and appreciate. And those are moments that it also made me realize, like, okay, there was nothing fancy about what we did. It's not like we stayed in this glamorous hotel or anything. Like, and we can take that joy that we felt there in Colorado, we can bring it back to where we are in Kansas City, because it's the simple stuff that makes us tick now. And yeah, even burning eggs along the way. Where before I would be, this is not kind of the right comparison, but I'll say, like, there would be days where I'll use the Kansas City Chiefs as an example. Had a pretty good run the past couple of years, but there would be days, especially for a season like this where they're kind of struggling, if the Chiefs had a terrible day on Sunday, it would ruin my whole week, and I would take it out on everybody around me. I mean, it's crazy to think about now, but I mean, that's how tied up I was into some of that stuff. And now I can watch a game, and I actually watch for the entertainment value. I'm not there because it's life or death and my team has to win. I'm just enjoying the moment. And I think that's what, I'm still trying to learn, but I feel like I'm getting better at it.
Yeah, you're making the shift on the connection as far as what a life and death moment defines within your reality. Back then it
so
was.
I really had a life and death moment.
Right. It was those kinds of experiences. And now those life and death moments are, what you're going to cook for dinner and what you're going to read. And I'm sure, I know that, you keep giving the satisfaction and everything to God about your decision and the way things happen. But just as much as that's an important aspect of it to you, there's also the reality that you're fortunate enough to have an understanding support system.
Yeah.
You were fortunate enough to have the ability to find within yourself to make change. And once you decided that you were going to make that change, you committed to it. And when you made the commitment, it was a matter of 100%, this is where I'm going to end up. I'm sure that you slipped and you fell a few times along the way. Nobody's perfect, especially when it comes to dealing with our vices that mask our depression, mask our anxiety. And, when it comes to the disconnecting, that is a very, very hard thing to shift away from. In my case, I cope with the disconnect by literally disconnecting and running off and hiding somewhere. That, because that's the outside world, just feels scary as hell to me. So I curl up in a little box and I just stay there. That's how I deal with it at this point. Just still better than what I used to do. And when you make those commitments and you put the steps forward, you lean on a support system that really understands you, that sets a solid foundation. And then in your case, when you add the religion aspect in there, you set yourself up for success. Now, like I said, it's not a process that's easy. It's a process that is guaranteed you're going to fall on your face because you have to learn. You're literally taking your entire life, setting it to the side, and you're trying to redraw the entire concept in which you live, and how you operate. And that ends up molding a completely different person. And that's where you're at now.
Yeah, I completely turned away from that old life that I have, and I'm walking a new path. And you're right, and it's not altogether easy at times. again, I've been fortunate, at least from the major vices, the pornography and the sex, I was able to walk away with that with a clean break. But there's still, there's still some the other things. I had anger management issues that they definitely aren't nearly as bad as they used to be. But there, every once in a while, there'd be a moment. I'll get a moment of being extremely impatient driving a car.
Right.
So they crop up in some of the same ways, not nearly as, again, as toxic as some of the other things. But you're right about the support system, and I just have to brag on my wife Amy, and just how proud I am of her for all going through all this. One of the things that I realized after this was, so we got married we got married 9 years ago, and before we got married, neither of us were believers in God, and so we were out drinking and partying and having a great time together. And we got married, and it was going great for 3 months. And then 3 months into our marriage, she dropped the bomb on me saying, I'm beginning to follow Jesus, which for me was just like, what are you saying to me right now? Like, it totally, like, oh, I wish you would have told me, a few months ago, because this would change kind of the course of our relationship. And because for her, when you make that commitment, it does, she changed. She went through the same change that I'm going through now. And the shows you watch, how you spend your time, what are you thinking about? It changed her, and we drifted apart there. But over the course of the 8 years, she consistently prayed for me to get saved. And even though all this evil I was bringing into our house, she still did that. And it's amazing. And I know she's got some friends out there that probably aren't as close to her anymore as they used to be, because they can't understand how she's possibly staying with a guy like me, which I totally understand, right? Like, I get it. I understand where they're coming from. But I can't imagine in Amy's shoes, having to deal with not only dealing with my baggage that we're trying to clean up, but then her friends are on the other side saying, breaking her down. So, but through it all, she stayed faithful. And this story, I would not be here. I'm convinced of that. If she had not forgiven me, our marriage would have ultimately ended, and I probably would have just careened off a cliff, literally, just in my addictions. I would have never been able to recover.
It's kind of funny you say it that way, because on the other side of that coin, it's kind of where I sit. I had, my 10-year marriage and whatnot. She never understood me enough to do anything besides beat the triggers and everything into me. Ultimately, I wound up homeless and divorced, with the last thing she ever said to my face being that I'm not worthy and I had nothing to offer her or my kids. Well, leading up to us getting married, my middle daughter, for lots of different mental health reasons, hadn't talked to or seen within a few years, probably about 9, 10 years. Well, since that moment, I've rebuilt my life. I've rebuilt connection with my children. In fact, I've even sought out and found my daughter and begun to build a relationship with my estranged daughter. That's actually why we're cooking up doing this a little later tonight. So, and in the course there was a failed suicide attempt. Don't think that was just an easy process, but
Sure.
It happens, man. I love the story and the success that you had, and there is hope out there for everybody, regardless of what the cards are that are in your hand. It's a matter of focusing on what is actually in your grasp, what is in your hand that you can control. And this is the key to dealing with all those triggers, because all those triggers come from the things outside of your hand that you cannot control. Luckily,
Right.
in the course of the my process, I've begun to build a new, safer support system that I can actually trust and rely on, and it's helped. It's been very pivotal. But a lot of the work, just like how you credit, all of your work towards your faith and everything,
Yeah.
a lot of my work has become within myself. And one
Sure.
thing that I one thing that I always struggled with, just like you have, that lack of self-worth, that lack of self-trust, and that's how it's built. It's built through the work, and it's forged in the fire of the struggles that we go through. And the fact that you and I are sitting here having this conversation, been through everything that you've been through and everything I've gone through, if I could reach through the phone right now and shake your hand, I damn well would. Because
Yeah.
this is what this is all about right here. Is
Yeah.
when you get down the path, you kind of look back and you extend the hand to people that are still at the beginning of the trail, and you tell them there is hope, man. You're gonna be able to pull through it.
Yeah.
I don't care what your cards are, and I don't care how bad you feel right now, how powerless you feel within that dark cloud or that circle that's around you. You can do it. This is a conversation between two people that have done it and that are still doing it. We're
Yeah.
still fighting that battle. It doesn't get much
Absolutely.
easier. It don't get much easier no matter how far you go down that road. You learn to build the toolbox that keeps you on the path. And through that path, you become the person you're supposed to be and you reach your full potential. And there may be more adversities for people like us that have to deal with, and I hate to use the phrase, but mental illness, because it's not an illness.
Yeah.
It's another adversity. It's another
Sure.
struggle, but it can be done. And when conversations like this happen that are difficult, these conversations lay down a roadmap for the next people that come along the line. And that's what we're doing
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great point, and I think about this all the time because people do ask me, like, why do you share your story like this? Like, why would you write a book about being a complete creep for most of your life? Um, and I believe me, when I started writing it and it got time to start talking about it, it was a little unnerving at first, but then I just remembered, like, this is what I'm called to do now. Um, I want something good to come out of all the pain that I've caused in my life, and this is a way to do it. And I want people to know that no matter what you're facing, because believe me, I considered myself, I'll use this in religious terms, I was the biggest, one of the, maybe not the biggest sinner in the world, but I probably was in the top 100. And if I can turn around my life, I promise you can turn around yours too. There is way out. There is hope.
exactly. This
There is.
isn't like there's not a one size fits all. And really, you put the book away, you put the project I do and the writing I do away. We're two human beings. We're two
Yeah,
people. And if we can do it, anybody can.
that's
I
right.
know I know in your lowest moments you feel like everybody in the world can be above you, because I do the same thing. So in those low moments, the fact that you continue to climb, you continue to struggle, you push on and you show that you're a prime example that this can happen for anybody, because we're just common people, just like everybody else out
Yeah,
there. And
that's
when you
right.
say how people ask you about writing the book that you wrote, how basically, to sum it up in your words, how you can write a book about being a creep your entire life.
Yeah,
Man, this project is nothing but my stories, my struggles, my falling on my face, and everything else, because there's a point to it. And there's a
there is.
there's a simple phrase out there. There's a simple quote. If it's not us, then who? If you're not
Yeah.
going to do it, if you're not going to share your story, then who will? If I'm not going to do the same thing, who will? And bottom line is all these words that we put together, be it us talking or in book form, any other form, those words become works for somebody else in the
Yeah.
process of their going forward in their recovery for anything.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Man, I just appreciate you letting me have a chance to share my story with your audience and with you too. And it's good to connect. And you're right. I mean, like, there's nothing magical about me, or I'm just a regular dude that got caught, messed up world. But I remember my wife would always say to me, and this is in reference to in believing in God, but she would always say, "What have you got to lose?" Right? Like, and so no matter what, again, no matter what the situation is, what do you got to lose? Take a step in faith and take a step in a different direction. And maybe it won't work, and you end up you're still stuck in that hole, but maybe you're not. Maybe you actually are able to climb out of that hole and start going up that ladder. And I took a leap of faith, and here I am. And
Right.
wouldn't have it any other way.
That's exactly it. What do you got to lose by any of it? Because
Yeah,
what you got to gain is breaking all the cycles that are unhealthy that
that's
you're a
right.
part of. Whether it's a
Yep.
cycle that you've learned growing up, it's a cycle that you developed, or it's a cycle that you're just in that is unhealthy for you or people that it touches. What do you got to lose by trying to break it?
That's right.
And breaking them, as I'm learning along the way, breaking those cycles is a hell of a lot scarier sounding than it is in reality. It's an easy thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think I spilled my guts.
I think we ended on that note. I think that was a powerful moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you again, man. I really enjoyed talking with you and being able to share.
Absolutely. Hey, coming up like the first week the next year, I'm trying to put together a series that's going to go all week long and kind of highlight some of the best conversations and the
Yeah.
best guests. This conversation right here was awesome. If you want, we can set up another one and I'll throw it in that week somewhere.
Yeah. I'd love to. And there's
All
still
right,
so
cool.
much to unpack. Yeah.
Right. All right, sounds good. So I don't know if you still got the link to the calendar or not.
Yeah, I think I do.
All right,
Yeah, you
cool. Yeah,
texted
book
me,
another.
right?
Yeah, yeah, just
Okay.
book another
Yeah.
spot and
Okay.
we'll figure it out from there.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah, I got more stories rabbit holes we can go down for sure.
Right on. Very cool. All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Yeah,
Thanks for
thanks.
being
Have a great
flexible.
weekend.
All right, you too.
Yeah, no, of course. Okay, man. Take
All right, man.
care.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.